Hi, I'm Ekta. I'm a lawyer by profession and a partner of Samvad Partners. I take care of the Hyderabad office of the firm. So earlier we had gone to, we'd run through what broadly constitutes a term sheet and transaction documents. Now coming to jargon. So jargon, we can broadly talk about jargon in four broad buckets. One is when you're looking at taking decisions in the company, an investor then has affirmative or reserve rights. What does this mean? Affirmative and reserve matters are nothing but veto rights, which gives an investor the power to block a resolution even if a significant majority of the shareholders or board have voted in favor of such a decision. These matters are typically listed in a schedule or in the main body of the document, and this could have an operational impact on the affairs of the company. So it's very important for both the investor and the promoters to be in sync on what these operational matters are that could have an impact on the affairs of the company, which the promoters are comfortable with giving the investors the power of veto. If the parties are not in sync on these, this could give rise to conflicts at a later date. So it's very important that a promoter understands what the list of affirmative matters are, how it would impact business on a going forward basis. The next bucket that we look at is when we come with dealing with securities. When you're talking about securities of a company, it could mean shares, it could mean debentures, it could be preference capital. So when you're looking at these securities, typically shareholders agreements have a transfer restriction on the promoters and other shareholders of the company, which in other words means that they cannot transfer their shares without an investor's consent. However, even when such consent is given, you have other provisions that do kick in. Common ones are the right of first refusal, in other words ROFR, and the right of first offer, ROFO. So when you're talking about the right of first refusal, it's quite, it's self-explanatory. In other words, say that I have the right to refuse, which in other words mean that the selling shareholder has to first get an offer on the table, and the existing shareholders of the company who are interested in acquiring those shares have the right to match the price. And if they're able to match the price, then the shareholder who wants to sell those shares is obligated to transfer it to the shareholders who've made the offer. The right of first offer is price determination by the existing shareholder of the company who is interested in acquiring the shares of a shareholder who wants to sell those shares. So in such cases, once a price is set by shareholders, the shareholder who wants to sell those shares has to go out in the market and can sell it only at a price that is higher than the price that was set by an existing shareholder. If such shareholder is not able to find a price that is higher, he then becomes obligated to sell the shares to the shareholder who made the initial offer. The next two words that we keep hearing are tag along and drag along. In simple English, when you tag along means when you attach. So when a shareholder is selling shares, the shareholder who has a tag right has a right to sell part of his shares, usually pro rata, along with the shareholder who is selling the shares. In this context, it's important to note that in some cases, an investor asks for a disproportionate tag along right, which means a tag right to sell more than what he would otherwise be pro rata entitled to, and which could go up to his entire shareholder in the company if the promoters sell controlling stake in the company. The next one is drag along rights. Drag is quite, contrary to tag, where I have the right to attach to a selling shareholder. The right to drag is where a shareholder who is selling his shares has the right to call upon other shareholders of the company to mandatorily sell part or all of the shares along with him. This typically is used in cases where the investor is not able to get an exit in terms of the transaction documents and is required to sell its shares to a third party, and the third party is agreeable to acquire shares of the investor, but expectation is that the acquirer gets more shares than what the investor has. In such cases, the investor typically asks either the other shareholders or promoters of the company to sell some or all of their shares along with the investor to the third party in which case then the investor manages to get its exit.